Welcome to Being Revolutionary.
Greetings, revolutionaries, and welcome to what's this? Oh,
That's Fletcher on my koozie.
that's great. I love that.
That's
right.
LaCroix, by the way, not beer.
That's why I was going to put this. I was going to put it in a whiskey glass, and I was like, we probably don't want to. We probably don't want to put that on our YouTube channel.
This podcast is casual. It's not that casual.
We just start smoking cigars and pipes and stuff. So, anyways, you're welcome, listeners. If we decide to include this little prelude to our episode, which we might, it's kind of fun. But anyways, welcome to Being Revolutionary, episode 2 of season 2, and this is entitled Timeshare, Trap or Treasure. So I got a little bit of drama there for you. But before we start in with that, we'll just go through our usual housekeeping.
Make sure to check out our YouTube channel. Obviously, you can find us on any of your favorite podcast providers, but we're also now on video on YouTube. So make sure to search Being Revolutionary at YouTube and like and subscribe if that's your choice. And also make sure to write us. We've got our email address. So if you have any thoughts on the show or you want to hear us talk about any particular topics, our email address is brev@trilogyfs.com. That's BEREV@trilogyfs.com.
Right on. And if you don't mind, take a quick minute right now. We'll wait. You know, we are the kings of awkward pauses. And rate and review, subscribe, as Nate said, smash buttons, I don't know, whatever, all the cool millennial stuff that I know nothing about. How's that for dating myself? But anyways, let's get into the episode, shall we?
Why don't you give us a little introduction? So we're talking timeshares today, right?
That's right.
So everybody get your wallets out and get ready to buy. Wait.
Like, what are we listening to right now? Timeshares?
No.
What? No. What we're going to do is, we're going to talk about a subject that comes up pretty often in the course of our jobs, and that is ROI, also known as return on investment, and how it's often misinterpreted. So, how that's usually communicated to us anyways is folks gauge their profits of their investment and they determine that as return on investment, but how they go about doing that is always sort of a mystery to us. And sometimes it's comical. On today's episode, we're going to unpack this oversimplification with this perspective and dive deeper into the considerations that folks need to make when they're seeking return on investments, which really, I think what we're going to find by the end of the episode is the term isn't being used correctly. Really what we're talking about is opportunity cost. So that being said, welcome to Being Revolutionary. Nate, how are you doing?
I'm good. End of another long week here, kind of working some remote, working some from home. So kind of getting back into the swing of things there. And obviously excited to talk about this topic that impacts lots and lots of different conversations we've had over the years with clients and is sure to come up again and again and again moving forward, as we'll find out as we go through this topic. But as always, we like to start with a little bit of story time, and by we I mean Matt likes to start with story time. So what? Matt, why don't you kick us off? With an introductory story that'll kind of be the way we have this mapped out is we're going to kind of weave this storyline throughout the episode with a purpose of really helping guide our conversation to getting into some of these different nuances on this topic. So with that, why don't you give us kind of the intro, Matt, and we'll just go from there.
Well, I am going to use my timeshare story as an example, but real quick, I'm sure a majority of people that are listening probably already know what we're talking about. But in the event that we've got a listener that doesn't, Nate, offhand, what's your synopsis of a timeshare?
I don't know a ton, to be honest. I mean, other than what I've learned through other people's experiences, I have none of my own. But from what I understand, very basically, it's essentially ownership in some sort of vacation situation, whether it's points that you can be spent at various properties in different locations, or if it's actual ownership in a particular property in a particular location that you have rights that you can use a particular amount of nights per year. But there's obviously a lot more depth and layers and nuance to it than that. But essentially, it's a purchased vacation ownership.
Yeah, spot on. So that's pretty much essentially it in general terms. Is you're paying for a they being the timeshare companies phrase it as or dub it as ownership. Whether it really truly is ownership in a traditional sense, that's yet to be determined, and it kind of depends on who you're
Right.
dealing with. But that being said, I'll go ahead and start in on my story, and then we can kind of just take things from there. So a few years ago, my wife and I were at the Temecula Wine and Balloon Festival, and we were just kind of moseying along, enjoying the atmosphere. And someone at one of the tents caught my wife's attention. I look over and I'm like, oh no, like, because I immediately knew timeshare. Which means 90 minutes of my life listening to a person that I already know. In most cases, before I even go in there, the answer is going to be no. So I have gone to a couple. My wife hadn't at that point. So she's like, well, what do you think? And I was like, hey, babe, it's an experience. So if you want to go, let's whatever. And they gave us like I don't know, free weekend or some gift cards to Red Lobster.
There's
or something.
always some sort of carrot to get you in there.
And
yeah.
and they are legit. They do deliver on that. So at least the ones that I've attended. So anyhow, we ended up agreeing, and it's for a timeshare located down in San Diego. So that's in a portion of some of the southernmost parts of Southern California. And we attended, and as we were going through the process and the presentation, the sales guys kind of getting to know us, and hey, so Mrs. Phillips, what do you do for a living? Oh, I work for da da da, and I do this and I do that, and it's like, okay, that's great. Mr. Phillips, what is it that you do for a living? Oh, I'm an investment advisor. And it went awkwardly silent for about 30 seconds. And so the look on his face was great. But regardless, he walked us through the process and immediately turned his main focus to Kimberly and started asking her all the questions and kind of ignored me for the rest of the time. And then, about an hour and a half later, there's the call to action. That's hey, so this is a really great thing, right? You want to buy it or not? So at this point, my wife and I were faced with what we're going to be discussing as opportunity costs, not return on investment. And I know we're going to kind of dissect that here in a little bit. But Nate, do you want to kind of share with the class what opportunity costs are?
Yeah, I mean that's ultimately when you get to the end of really any sales presentation, or when you are in front of really almost any decision that you're going to be making, the concept of opportunity cost is present. Now, whether you recognize it or not is another thing entirely, but really what opportunity cost represents is the benefits that an individual or group of people miss out on when choosing an alternative. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's a negative. You use a phrase like misses out on, that's the kind of that FOMO mentality or whatever. But functionally speaking, it's like a fork in the road. You can either do A or B, but if you do A, you can't have B. And so there's very, very simple concept. As an example, would be a simple financial opportunity cost would be if we have a client who gets a raise. Most of the time, they will tell us about that. And the next question that usually comes is, what should we do with this extra money in our budget? Should we invest more? Should we pay down on our mortgage? If we choose to invest, should it go to retirement or into our kids' college account or into our emergency fund? There's lots of different options. But one thing we know for sure is the opportunity cost there is what ends up not being done. So what is the cost of what doesn't get done? And does that negatively impact the decision that gets made ultimately as well? Right. So there are financial opportunity costs. Those are probably the most obvious ones that we deal with. There's certainly opportunity costs related to our time or our energy or our work life or our families. And then, of course, the emotional opportunity costs as well for decisions that we make. Yeah.
And this gentleman in particular was really driving home the whole Well, think of all the memories you're going to have, kind of pressing that emotional lever big time. Think of all the memories you'll have with your family. I mean, really, can you not afford to, can you not afford to miss out on this? Think of what you're giving up, and they were really good at when they were walking us through the presentation, as they should be, of like really helping us visualize and live in those moments and experience what we would receive if we were to take this opportunity. And timeshares are a good example of opportunity cost. Another one that I think is very relevant and probably a lot more common than what folks would think is, and you and I have gotten in conversations with clients about this a couple of times, and that's private education, like at the elementary school level. There hasn't been any client that I know of, and maybe you can correct me on this, that I've ever dealt with where they've become benefited financially from, making that investment in their child in private education.
No, there's all kinds of other potential benefits, obviously, as far as the education itself or the quality of the institution you're at, or whatever the culture that's influencing your children, and many number of reasons why people would choose private education.
Yeah.
But as far as the cost, it is higher than public education. I mean, it's black and white, right? So that's kind of interesting as it relates to return on investment, or ROI. There are different layers to that as well, which we'll get into later. But just kind of conceptually understanding, kind of black and white data is going to be a part of the conversation, and then there's going to be more nuance on some of the other topics as well. So it's not surprising to me that the salesperson you're with is trying to remove the focus from the cost, which is, regardless of what way you slice it on a timeshare, if you're cutting a check for the whole deal, or if you're going to finance it or whatever, it's higher than a one-time vacation in almost any case, right? Unless definitely. You take very expensive vacation.
Definitely.
So to try to deflect away from what's probably the biggest negative, which is just the sheer dollars and cents, and to try to focus in on the experiences and really trying to get people to visualize what this is going to be like from an experience or from a luxury standpoint, is not a bad sales method, of course. So while that's all going on, kind of what's going through your mind? Like, were you going to get caught up in that a little bit, or were you just kind of really waiting for, okay, well, what's the bottom line on this thing, money-wise?
Well, and this of me very well. I tend to, when I'm presented with one thing, I want to know the other three options. So I am an opportunity cost analyst big time. Like, what am I giving up to get this? But what am I getting? And is that going to be worth what I'm giving up? Kimberly was liking the idea. And she's not an easy sell by any means. So there was a legitimate value there. I'll totally agree with that. And it did cause for pause and consideration. But I immediately started seeing the numbers where it was like, okay, so this gentleman's saying, okay, for the average family of 4, the average cost of a vacation is $14,000 per year, which I've never done in my life. Not to this day. And so, which is okay. That's fine. If that's the average cost, I'm well below the average. I can accept that. So he started, like I said, leveraging the, think of all the vacations you've already missed and all the memories you've missed out on. Why not make that correction now? You can take this opportunity. You won't be doing that anymore. You'll have tons of memories and families, and you can will it to your kids and like all these sorts of things.
So almost kind of imagine if you would have met me 10 years ago, where you would have been today with your accumulated memories. Okay. Yeah. Which, I mean, that's legitimate, I guess, in one sense.
Yeah. It was kind of the anti-buyer's remorse.
Well, and it's interesting because we all know people who have had phenomenally good experience with timeshares too. And we for sure know people that have not, but I can think of colleagues of ours. I can think of clients we work with and friends we have who take full advantage of their timeshares on a regular basis. And they kind of really dive into the system and know what they want to get out of it and make sure that they get great value out of it. But I will say the overwhelming majority of people I've met, that is not the case. So I know that the salespeople are facing a fair degree of skepticism, probably from the general public most of the time as well. So they kind of have to battle against that from a a presentation standpoint.
I would imagine so, and ultimately what the gentleman like concluded the presentation portion, because then it turned into negotiation after that. So at the end of the presentation, he was saying all the things about memories and, doing that anti-buyer's remorse. Oh, think of what think of all the stuff you missed out on. What price would you put on something like that? And then does the awkward pause, and then like actually has you like give a number, because he's already kind of fed you the numbers. You got $14,000 a year in average, so I'm below average, so I'm feeling insufficient. Like I've already done my family a disservice because I haven't dropped $14,000 a year.
Okay.
And then what price would I put on that? 10 years, $140,000, I think. Right. Which I'm doing
a little
this
less times 10 years. Right.
Carry
I mean,
one.
it doesn't really. It almost doesn't matter what number you come up with. It's that the idea is to start equating experiences with money, right?
Exactly.
Which, by the way, that's a real thing. I mean, you can't go on vacation for free. I mean, there are people who travel for almost no money, right? Locally, or even people who are the massively great bargain hunters who can do what should be extraordinarily expensive things, right, for not very much money. But there is going to be some exchange of currency involved with most experiences, right?
Yeah, this is definitely an opportunity cost with a financial impact. It's not about time. It's not about. It is absolutely like, hey, we are asking you to pay us this much, and in exchange, we'll give you this. And
the flip side of that is true as well, right? Like, for sure, the timeshare salesperson is correct in that there is an opportunity cost on the family emotional experience, whatever you want to call it, side of things as well, if you choose to not do those things. So yes,
100%.
You can keep the money.
Yep.
Right. But you will not have, and by the way, you haven't had, right? This is what he's
exactly
the thing he's playing up is you haven't had these experiences. And what was that? Was that worth it? Was it not worth it? That's where that kind of this, and again, thematically, this is why we're talking through this lens. It's one of those really good examples of not only financial, but non-financial opportunity cost and concepts of return on investment, because so much of what we do in our financial planning and our decision making on a daily basis, working with clients, communicating with people, is that balance between money and time, effort, energy, and experience.
Exactly.
And we're constantly having to balance those things in our financial lives. So this is it's a really kind of a clickbait style way to go through this. Of course it is, but that's the reason for that is there's so much emotional response to timeshare. There's almost nobody who doesn't have a super positive, super negative thought process on that. So it makes the conversation really tactile.
Yeah. Some folks love them. Some folks hate them. But that's actually not even really and you know this, but just for our listeners, that's not the reason why we're bringing up timeshare, is to determine whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. That what we're trying to do is use this story to put into context, one of our favorite words, what opportunity costs are, whether it's investment, emotional, financial, energy, physical, all those sorts of things. What are you giving up for what you're getting in return? And is that in alignment with your goals and where you want to be? So, as he concluded the presentation and turned it into the negotiation portion of things, which he didn't realize it was a negotiation, but I knew it because I'm like, there's no way. When he started throwing numbers at me, saying $14,000 a year, I'm like, okay, you're way overshooting the mark in my area already. But I did absolutely go the analytical route. And so, he was telling me, I think it was like 20, well, where is it? I know I wrote this down somewhere here. The actual dollar amount was $25,000. That's what it was. So basically what he was asking me to do to own vacations, meaning that I'm going to have the opportunity to take up to 2 weeks vacation with my family per year. And instead of $14,000 a year, I'm only going to have to pay $25,000 over the course of 5 years. And then that's basically going to take care of family vacations at a $14,000 level for that 5 years and the rest of our lives, provided insert fine print and small print, all the other kind of prints that they put in the contracts at that point. So what he was asking was for me to borrow $25,000 at a 7.8% interest rate for 5 years, which a rough estimation there turns into $875 a month for 5 years.
Yeah. It's a steep payment, right?
Can be. Depends.
In one sense.
Yeah.
Right. For some people, they'll think that's awesome. Wow, $25,000 for a lifetime's worth of vacation.
That's a bargain.
I mean, that's not even two years worth of what I spend on average as a $14,000 vacationer.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Other people, like the kind of the sentiment you're expressing is, well, there's a little more to it than that. Yeah. Number one, borrowing money at close to 8% interest doesn't sound like a great deal to begin with. You're right. Mm-hmm. Like, why would I want to borrow money from you? I may want to borrow money from somebody else.
How about if I
was gonna do it?
Just use my own money. How about that? That's what we talk about with people all the time.
Well, and that's an interesting thing, right? In that conversation is a lot of times companies you're interacting with who have financing available, those companies are almost as much financing companies as far as their balance sheet and profit margins as they are tradespeople in whatever it is that they're selling, right? So whether it's an automobile manufacturer, if it's a hardware store, if it's Best Buy, right? Selling big screen TVs, they make almost as much money on the financing and frankly, the defaults on the financing and the collections and the repossessions as they do on the actual margin on the items they're selling in many, many cases. Thus, how like car leasing was born out of that concept.
Actually, you bringing that up made me think of your car purchase and how that went down. Is that something you want to share?
Well, yeah, it was so interesting. So when my old Acura, it had close to 250,000 miles on it. So I knew I wanted to, and it didn't have really any problems other than like I repaired the air conditioning system a couple of times, which I mean, at that point, you're grateful that's all that's really gone wrong. It was a great car. But I knew I wanted to replace that car. I basically wanted to buy just a 10-year newer version of exactly the thing I had because it worked so well for me and I don't really care about cars one way or the other. So I found, I just started looking online and basically I knew about what the right price was going to be based on the, certified pre-owned car that I wanted to buy. And I finally identified one, went to the, down to whatever, Anaheim Hills, and went to the dealership and said, hey, that one over there, I want to, go drive it for 3 or 4 minutes just to make sure it is what I know it already is. And then I would like to buy it for this price. And the sales guy immediately identified me as, oh, this is going to be, basically quick and easy sale, which he was right. But that's where it got interesting. So, we took the test drive, came back. It was exactly what I knew already because I had already driven one previously. And so we go to the office. We do a little bit of light negotiation. They come off of their whatever listed price just a little bit, although not that much. And I wasn't expecting it because I knew it was a fair price based on what I had seen had sold, at other places. So my expectations were in line. And then I pulled a check out of my pocket, one check that I brought. I had my driver's license and my car keys in this check.
What's a check?
And I asked him if he had it. I asked him literally, do you have a pen? Do you have a pen? I need to fill out my check. And he said, actually, we can't sell you that car for that price unless you finance it.
Oh, and there's the boom being lowered.
And then at that point, I knew I was going to be stuck in that stupid car dealership for another 2 to 3 hours because I wasn't going to leave at a higher price than at that point. So, long story short, went back and forth between him and his manager and God knows how many other people trying to just write a check and get out of here with this car. But bottom line is I finally ended up in the CFO's office, the lead finance person for the dealership. And he just laid it out for me because he found out basically I'm not an idiot. And he just said, look, we have to have, if you're going to get this price on this car, we have to have you finance it because we're going to make $1,200 commission on the loan when we sell it to Wells Fargo.
Yeah. Yep.
And without that $1,200 income, based on the margin we're making on this car, we would rather sit on the car and sell it to somebody else because we know we will than sell it to you at that price for cash.
Yep.
So he said, we apologize that you didn't understand that from the get-go. That's our salesperson's fault, et cetera, which of course it was all on purpose,
Sure.
The sales process. I know that. No, I knew what I was getting myself into. But he said, but here's what we can do. You can finance the car. The loan will get sold to Wells Fargo within 12 to 14 days. And then you just call Wells Fargo and pay the car off. You won't pay it. So I went through all the fine print to make sure I wasn't going to pay any interest, mostly out of principle. Not that I cared about 1 month's interest really.
Sure.
But at that point, I cared. You can be sure.
Yeah.
And however many 5 or 6 hours later, I finally got out of there with that car, which was super annoying. But here's the thing is that whole process is driven by ROI and opportunity cost. And by the way, both ways, right? Like I've got my time on the line, which to me is extraordinarily valuable. I've got my pride, right? My desire for what I want to happen and my research and all the work that I did on the front end. All of that's on the line. Now, of course, a lot of money for me as well. And then for them on the other side, they've got, extraordinarily tight margins, super competitive industry. They got a big commission they got to pay out to a salesperson. The finance manager is under pressure to sell loans pretty much for the car. So every layer of that process, there is ROI and opportunity cost for doing this versus this.
Yep.
And the whole system collapses if it doesn't run this one particular way, obviously, right? Like I almost can't buy a car because of the way the system is built. Right.
Cash.
Unless
that's the thing that's crazy about this for the whole story to me is like the old adage, cash is king.
Not really.
That's so true.
Not
anymore.
in that situation.
Yeah.
Although I will say that I did have a tremendous amount of leverage, right? Because eventually they were going to have to do something close to what I wanted. Because if that didn't happen, I would have walked out of there eventually, right?
And
nobody
would have
wanted
lost
that to happen.
And then they would have lost the opportunity of selling that car 100%.
Right. And if you know how car dealerships work, they're paying short-term insurance while that car sits on the lot against damage and theft. That's extraordinarily expensive. And every day a car sits on a lot, it's got a cost associated with it. So there's a lot that goes into that. But all that to say that when we make financial decisions or when we make decisions related to our family or our career or our time, there are always kind of winners and losers internally within those deals, whether it's just with yourself or with other people. So acting like that's not going on in the Western world is pretty foolish because it's going on almost all the time in everything that we do in that sense. So that's what's so interesting to me. And what's got me wondering, like in your process with Kimberly and this timeshare thing, what ended up happening? What was the conclusion that you came to?
Ultimately, I came back at him with the analytical responses that I usually concoct. And that was, okay, great. So you want me to pay $875 to you at a 7.8% interest rate for the next 5 years. What if instead I put $875 into an interest-bearing investment account at about the tune of 10% return on investment, which basically meant by the end of that 5-year term, I would have about $61,000, a little over $61,000 saved at that rate of return. So basically, I would have had 4 vacations saved up, or 4 $14,000 vacations saved up. So
right, or 20 vacations for yourself, right?
Bingo. Yeah, that's what I mean. Is it's like if Kimberly and I aren't going to be spending we're not going to do a $14,000 vacation every year. We would do that probably every 5 years, maybe 3 to 5 years.
Right. So in the context of a plan and slowly saved for over time and all the goal related stuff that we talked about in our last episode.
And that's the key. Then when I started talking that way, we literally asked the guy to leave us alone for about 20 minutes. And Kimberly and I talked it through so that we could get on the same page. And, she's saying, well, that doesn't really line up with our goals. That doesn't really line up with the household and financial philosophies and policies that we have in place. And I was like, yeah, it doesn't really. And we're borrowing money. And she's like, no, I don't know. I really want to do this, but I don't think it's the right thing. And I said, I agree. So we didn't go with it. But what we did do was we started having conversations about how we're going to save 2 different things for vacation in general, but also one of these days we will probably take a look at a timeshare just because it makes it ultra convenient and maybe make that a component of our vacation life, not the only source of vacation, but a component of it. So,
but in the context of a plan where you have independent research, not just what you're being told by a salesperson, and you kind of know what you're coming into on the front end and what you're going to spend and contextually how it's going to apply to your life. I
Yep.
mean, that's basically, I mean, it's a great illustration for return on investment
Yeah.
and analysis of that, right? Because you're asking some really important questions of your financial plan in that moment. Are vacations a priority in our household goals right now? Right. That's
Yep.
a huge question that you guys were battling with. And we know so much about your story from conversations we've had on and off this podcast, right? We know that is a huge discussion point about goals and what to do, kind of short-term cash flow versus long-term goals. And it is for everybody, of course.
Yep.
But then there's the emotional component as well. We have to recognize that that's going to be part of it as well. And then you have to start to be like realistic as well. Like, what is the likelihood that we're actually going to take and use these prepaid vacations versus having the discipline to spend that amount or less by planning our own vacations independently? Right?
Well, yeah, you and through the course of that, like even if it would have leaned towards, yeah, we want to do this, I would have needed that timeshare salesperson to explain to me in exhaustive detail, how does this redemption process work with the timeshare?
Right.
Because I don't want to be ready to take my family to Costa Rica, in prime vacation time, and then go, oh, sorry, you got the base package for, to visit that area.
To go to Costa Rica, it's going to be another $25,000,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Or you can go to Costa Rica, but it can be for these 3 days in mid-December or whatever, right?
Yeah. When it's raining and like monsooning and stuff.
Yeah. In other words, transparency of information would be helpful, and of course it would be. But the more transparent things get, usually, the less realistic they seem in a lot of cases.
Yeah. And
that, by the way, that's across every industry. It's something we fight against all the time as a fiduciary, right? In the investment services industry, right? So, that makes sense to me.
Ultimately, I was so thankful that we had these foundational things in effect in our marriage and in our budget and in our household finances and everything else, because if we didn't have those, and like you said, we've talked about this stuff before, if we didn't have the household and financial policies in place, if we didn't have that talk about goals, if we didn't have a budget that we actively integrate into our daily lives, a lot of folks, they drink the ether. Well, I guess you don't drink ether. You breathe the ether. I know. I'm just going to hey, it's Friday.
Wow.
I'm going to just make stuff up as we go along. Just go with me, all right? Anyways, these presentations, again.
I mean, I imagine it would be powerful if you drank ether.
That would be a good time.
Not the desired effect,
right.
But
I don't feel so good, Nate. What's going on? Oh, drink the ether? Oh, man, Matt drank the ether again. But no, like in reality, in a situation like this, and it can be anything, buying a car, timeshare, making an investment, paying for college, like all of these things. And you hit it right on the head when you talked about the emotional component of this. That is a majority of the time, that is what gets people in trouble. It's the emotion. Oh, well, it's just another bill. Oh, we, finance something else. Oh, we'll just go make more money. Oh, right. An excuse. And the idea is to command your finances, not react to the circumstances of your emotional desires.
Yeah. Ultimately, what it boils down to for us is there's going to be a balancing act between opportunity costs and consideration of ROI always.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. In every decision we make. And it's going to be a critical part of a financial plan in all the decisions we make. So functionally, and this is to me the big takeaway for people, is if we do not find ourselves consistently discussing these types of concepts as we're making decisions, and that could be with a spouse, that could be with an advisor, it could be with someone that you talk openly about your finances with if you don't have a spouse.
Right.
You're probably going to be missing out on efficiencies in your financial plan. So if you're not talking about internal ROI on your rental properties, or the ROI on your mutual funds, or the investments that you're making in personal development, right, for education for yourself or for your kids, or towards professional certifications that you still have pending. Or if it's just something very, very simple, like we got a raise, and have we considered using some of that raise to pay down high interest debt? I mean, right there is a very simple opportunity cost, return on investment conversation you can have with yourself or with others or with an advisor that should constantly be going on in a financial plan to try to find areas of better efficiency. And as you talk about all the time, Matt, in the context of this show that we have, is to take the data that should be driving a lot of our decisions and at least bring it up on an equal playing field with that emotional kind of cultural decision making that we know is always going to be present and almost dominate as default in our decision making process.
I literally couldn't have said it better. I don't think the words existed in me, so no, I appreciated that.
Good.
But anyways, wrapping up. So yeah.
Bottom line, you don't own a timeshare yet, right?
No, and
Okay.
maybe, and actually that one did seem pretty attractive. It was within an hour and a half of our house. So if we wanted to go enjoy, the facilities during the day, we could do that anytime. Didn't matter what, we didn't have to use our timeshare credit, blah, 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 whatever. So yeah, really, in the end, the program itself seemed attractive and appealing. But our goals, our policies and our budget said it's not right now.
Yeah. Which that's a great lesson for people to take away, is when you use this style of thinking or this type of analysis, it doesn't always mean the answer is no. Sometimes the answer is yes. Sometimes the answer is just not yet. Be patient and wait, right? So just like anything else, that we deal with in financial planning.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah. So anyways, we would like to thank all of you revolutionary thinkers for joining us again today. We hope that we drove the point home and you found something of value from what we discussed. Remember to check out our YouTube channel for those of you that are listening to us on podcast. For those of you that are watching us on YouTube, be sure to check out our podcast on your favorite platform. Do a little quid pro quo there. Subscribe, whatever. I'm not hip and cool, so
rate,
you know what
review,
I mean. Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, all of that.
Well, make sure to share episodes, particularly if there's concepts that you have conversations with people, and this kind of stuff comes up. Just shoot them an episode. That way we can keep the conversation going. I mean, obviously, unless you hate what we have to say, in which case, if you're still listening, I don't know what to tell you.
No, write us and tell us how much you dislike what we're talking about. How about that? Either way, we win.
Absolutely.
Take the opportunity.
And like we mentioned earlier, send us a note and let us know if there's some particular topics that we've already hit on that you want a little bit more detail on, or if there's something bigger picture that we haven't really hit on that we should be talking about. We would love to kind of craft this thing the way you want to hear it. But other than that, it's been a good conversation today. I think this topic of ROI and certainly opportunity cost is going to continue to come up in a lot more of our conversations. So nice to set a little bit of a foundation on that today.
Anytime, yep.
And Matt, appreciate your time, and
appreciate you, sir.
To everybody listening.
Yep.
So until next time, we'll catch up with you soon. Keep being revolutionary.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for being revolutionary.
Being Revolutionary is produced by Matthew Phillips and Nathan Brown in partnership with Trilogy Financial. Research by Nathan Brown and Matthew Phillips. Editing, music, and recording by Paper Street Productions. Art by Matthew Phillips.
All investing involves risk, including loss of principal. No strategy assures success or protects against loss. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect against market risk.
The opinions voiced in this show, Being Revolutionary, are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial advisor, or tax advisor prior to investing. All performance referenced is historical and is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly.
Matthew Phillips is an investment advisor representative for Trilogy Capital. Investment advisory services offered through Trilogy Capital Inc., a registered investment advisor. Trilogy Capital markets advisory services under the name of Trilogy Financial, an affiliated but separate legal entity. California license 0K03460. Nathan Brown is a registered representative for LPL Financial and an investment advisor representative for Trilogy Capital. Securities offered through LPL, member FINRA SIPC. California license 0F37267.